Stephen, do you want to introduce yourself and tell us what you're going to talk about today?
Okay, well, my name is Steve Frazier. I'm the former New Mexico HLAA chapter coordinator. I served with the Albuquerque chapter and in a number of capacities. I've been involved in HLAA at the state level, at the national level, and I'm now writing about it and getting articles published about HLAA and about hearing loss and hearing loops in magazines around the country. I'm not quite just sure. Let me see what I do to get the slide presentation on the screen.
We got to give you access.
Okay, are you seeing are others seeing the slide?
No, not yet.
No.
What do I have to do to get it to you?
Steve, look at the bottom of your screen and you'll see something that says share screen. And when
Okay.
you click on that, it'll take you to your desktop. You could share your PowerPoint. You could share anything that's open.
Okay, but I've got to get out of the full screen. I've got to get out of the full screen right now to do that. And at this point, I'm looking at my slide presentation, but I'm the only one that's seeing it.
Well, when you are showing your presentation, you can't generally see everybody else. But we're not seeing your presentation.
Well, that's it. I need to get my presentation off of the screen. It's on the full screen.
So can you click on the bottom on your Zoom window? So the Zoom windows.
I have no Zoom window. I'm in the full screen mode in
Press escape.
escape.
Upper left corner. of the
Okay.
screen.
Okay. Full screen. Just a minute. Share screen. Okay.
Okay, so you're sharing your screen, but not your presentation.
Okay, now
Now we see it.
We see it.
you're seeing it. And now we should be in the full screen mode. Okay. Okay, so the title of the presentation is America's Getting in the Hearing Loop. First time I ever heard about hearing loops was 25 years ago when I discovered a group in Albuquerque called Self-Help for Hard of Hearing People. And I went to my first meeting. And just as the meeting was starting, somebody spoke up and said, wait a minute, is the loop on? And I turned to the person next to me and I said, what's a loop? And she explained to me what it was. And she said, all you have to do is turn on your telecoils. And I said, well, what are telecoils? And she explained to me what telecoils were, and they were obviously something I had never learned about. So since then, I've heard both of those questions, I don't know how many times. What's a loop and what's a telecoil? And those are some of the things that we will be addressing today in the presentation. I'm going to get all of you in the hearing loop if you're not already there. We'll discuss some facts about hearing loss. What is an assistive listening system? The story of electromagnetic induction. What's a hearing loop? What's a telecoil? And then discuss the fact that hearing loops are definitely happening in America and they're very prevalent abroad. I've got a lot of slides to go through, so unless somebody has an urgent question that needs an immediate answer, I usually ask people to hold their questions until we get to the end of the presentation so that we can get to the end. First, here's some facts about hearing loss that people are not necessarily aware of. HLAA says there are 48 million people in the United States with a measurable hearing loss. The thing that people don't realize is that 65% of those people are under the age of 65. Hearing loss is not just something that affects elderly people. 20% of school-age children are hard of hearing. And there are a lot of causes for this hearing loss. Noise is the major cause, not aging. And here's a list of the various causes, as you can see. 4.5% at birth, 12% from ear infections, 5% from ear injuries, 10% from brief loud noise. That can be one young person going up and standing at the stage during a rock concert and never having good hearing again. Other noise, another 23%. Aging is attributed to only about 28% of hearing loss. Now, when you can't hear and what the ADA calls a place of assembly, what is the solution? An assistive listening system may resolve the problem. Hearing aids by themselves are not going to be sufficient. The ADA defines assistive listening systems as an amplification system utilizing transmitters, receivers, et cetera, et cetera. You can read it all for yourself there. Basically, what it's doing is putting the speaker on the stage or at the podium or whatever right beside you rather than maybe 200 feet away. There are a number of different assistive listening systems that are in use in this country, and I'll just briefly review them. The first is RF, or known also as FM systems. They are radio frequency. They require the user to borrow a receiver and a headset or a neck loop in order to hear through the system. Infrared systems, also known as IR systems, use light beams, and they operate the same way. You have to borrow a receiver and a neck loop or a headset to get it to work. AFILs, or audio frequency induction loop systems, which is a very long, complicated name. We just call them hearing loops. You don't need a receiver and you don't need to borrow any equipment. All you need to do is touch a button on your hearing aids or your cochlear implant processor in order to hear. Now there's a new entry in the field, and that's Wi-Fi systems. They transmit a signal using radio waves and a digital signal processing. But the problem with those is that you have to use your smartphone, or you have to borrow a receiver in order to pick up that signal. And the receiver or your smartphone must have the program for the particular system that's in use. You may go to a gym and download a program into your phone to use this, but it doesn't mean when you go to the sports bar next door that you're going to be able to connect to their system. So it has a number of problems. Now, why is an assistive listening system needed? There are a number of reasons. First is the sound level of speech itself. This involves what's called the speech to noise ratio. Then the amount of ambient noise that there is, reverberation in the room, unfriendly PA systems, and also COVID masks. This graph demonstrates the difference in the ability of a person with hearing aids and hearing loss to that of a person with normal hearing, where the two groups were tested in the same conditions. The people with normal hearing heard 88% of what was being said and understood it. Those with hearing loss, even with their hearing aids, were only getting 14% of it. So the one thing that this demonstrates is that, unlike eyeglasses, which supposedly return your vision to 20/20, hearing aids are not going to return your vision to your hearing to the oral equivalent of 20/20. Now, some of the reasons for this is, I just noted some of them earlier. Normal speech is in the 60 to 65 decibel range. And that's if somebody is standing 6 to maybe 8 feet away from you. Hearing aid microphones will pick up their voice and you'll understand it at that distance. But if they move further away, your hearing aids are not necessarily going to be enough. Distance decreases the sound pressure and the sound level by 6 decibels for every time and the distance is doubled. If somebody's standing 6 feet away from you and you're able to hear them and understand them, if they move 12 feet away, their voice is going to be 6 decibels less, which to the human ear is going to almost sound like 50 or 75% softer. So you're not going to hear them. The other reason for this is the high pitch sounds, the high frequencies, which is what most of us have because most of us have what's called a ski slope hearing loss. Those high pitch sounds don't have the strength that the low pitch sounds do. That's the reason you can hear a boom car a block away, but you don't hear the high pitch sounds that are in that music, even when it's right next to you. The normal hearing, the speech to noise ratio is the difference between the voice or the level of the speaker and the level of any background sounds. And in normal circumstances, a person with normal hearing is going to be able to understand what's being said if the background noise is about 10 decibels below the level of the speech. Studies have found that for hard of hearing people, whether they're using hearing aids or not, because of a number of reasons, it needs to be 20 to 25 decibels lower, which means that if somebody is speaking at a 70 decibel level, the background noise shouldn't be more than about 50 decibels, which is the sound of a refrigerator running 3 feet away. Ambient noise, of course, is people talking, fussy children, people coughing, the hum from the ventilation system. All of those sounds also cover the voice of a speaker, and particularly those high-pitched sounds that we have trouble hearing. Reverberation, echoes add to that. They also make it difficult for us to understand speech. This is a graph that demonstrates the difference between a person with normal hearing and a person who is hard of hearing. The higher the reverberation goes in either case, the fewer words they're able to identify from a speaker. But in both instances, the normal hearing person doesn't have as much difficulty as the hard of hearing person. When you add reverberation to the ambient noise, it becomes even a bigger problem, as this graph demonstrates, where a person with even a mild loss doesn't understand as many words as a person with normal hearing. And one with a moderate loss, it's even less. Then there's what I call unfriendly PA systems. And to me, they're unfriendly because the person operating the system doesn't have an understanding of hearing loss and the fact that we can't hear high-pitched sounds, but rather than up the high-pitched sounds so we can understand what's going on, they will put in more bass in order to what they think makes the whole thing sound better. And it makes it impossible for us to understand what is being said sometimes. Face masks, it turns out, have been, as you probably have experienced yourself, a big problem for people with hearing loss. They reduce up to 10 decibels the loudness of a person's voice who is speaking to you. 10 decibels would be perceived as about half as loud so 50 decibels would be perceived as about half as loud as 60 decibels. And here the graph shows the difference in the number of words identified for an adult wearing a mask and speaking, an adult without a mask. It also demonstrates it with children. Now, why would a hearing loop be more adequate and serve our needs better than an FM system and an infrared system? Well, first of all, because it will serve one person or 100 people. I have a loop in my living room. When my brother-in-law would come over to visit, he and I could both hear the TV set. If I was using Bluetooth, and had a system set up for my hearing aids, his hearing aids couldn't connect to it. We'd need to put in another microphone and transmitter for him. With hearing loops and telecoils, you simply touch a button to activate it. You don't have to borrow any equipment. You don't have any concerns over the cleanliness of the equipment that's being loaned to you. You don't have any last minute rush to try and get the equipment when you arrive somewhere, and you don't get a transmitter or a receiver rather that has dead batteries. Now, a lot of people, when I start talking about this, say, oh, my audiologist told me I don't need telecoils. That's old technology. Well, it is old technology, but so is the wristwatch, and so are electric cars, and so is the telephone. And that doesn't mean that they're outdated, but they are right. It is old technology. Michael Faraday, a British scientist, discovered electromagnetic induction way back in 1831. And as time passed, a lot of different applications were found for this technology, transformers, generators, other things. Then in 1885, an Italian inventor, Galileo Ferraris, invented the first electromagnetic induction motor. But I guess he didn't know just what purposes to put it to, and it just kind of died. The Serbian-American engineer, Nikola Tesla, reinvented it in 1888, and it's still in use today in electric motors and a lot of other things, including the Tesla car. It was in 1937 that the first electromagnetic induction loop system was developed. It was invented by a Russian-born British telephone and sound engineer named Joseph Kolyakov. He was the founder of the Multitone Electric Company in the United Kingdom. It was just a short time later that he developed the first wearable hearing aid that worked with a hearing loop, and it was worn in the chest pocket. It was made by the Multitone Electric Company in England in 1938. Not surprisingly, obviously, telecoils and hearing loops are a principle of assistive listening system in the United Kingdom. Over the last 30 years, hearing loops have become the default assistive listening system and solution in Europe, Scandinavia, and Australasia, and they're now becoming increasingly prevalent in America, according to Ampetronic, one of the major British manufacturers of hearing loops. Now, hearing loops don't work unless you have to connect to them. What's a telecoil? It's obvious. It's a tiny copper receiver that receives the sound transmitted by the hearing loop. They're very small, but they won't fit in the tiniest hearing aids. Here's an example of a typical behind-the-ear hearing aid with a telecoil in it. In the United Kingdom, the National Health Insurance, which provides free hearing aids to people, 95% of those hearing aids have telecoils. That's how important it is as a technology in England. Now, what is a hearing loop? Hearing loop is a wire that surrounds an area that you want people to be able to hear in. And the way it works is that the speaker has a microphone that's connected to a transmitter. That transmitter sends the sound into the loop itself. The loop sends it onto the telecoils, and then it goes to the hearing aids, and you hear it as sound. Now, again, why not Bluetooth? Because it doesn't serve 100 people. You need 100 different transmitters to serve 100 people in an audience using Bluetooth. Why not infrared or FM? For the same reasons I cited, that you need to borrow a receiver and return it. You may need to remove your hearing aids, and you run the risk of damaging or losing them. And the sound with those systems is not customized to match your particular hearing loss. Most people have what I said is a ski slope hearing loss, but some it may be just the opposite. It's the low tones that they don't want, that they don't hear. And the hearing aids can be adjusted to amplify the sounds that give them the most difficulty more than the others, so that they're going to be able to hear better than they would with an FM system or an infrared system. Now, there are a lot of types of hearing loops. Some, what I consider to be hearing loop purists, only want to talk about and promote room loops, loops in places of worship or in big rooms. But there's others that serve purposes that I think are equally important. The different types that we're going to discuss is perimeter room loops, phased array loops, portable loops, neck loops, and some others. And let's take a look at them. The difference between that perimeter loop that I showed you earlier and a phased array loop is that the phased array is laid out in a grid pattern so that the signal is more even throughout the room, and it avoids what they call spill. Again, the sound is going from the presenter to the loop through all of these wires and ending up in the telecoils in the hearing aids. These diagrams show the difference between the signal of a phased array loop and of a perimeter loop. I have a perimeter loop in my living room. If I go in the garage, I can still hear the TV that's playing in the living room. If I had a phased array in the living room, like the diagram on the bottom, it contains that sound within that box. And the best demonstration I've ever seen of that was actually at a Hearing Loss Association convention a number of years ago in Washington. They had a room set up in the middle of a bigger room with portable walls around it, and they had put in a phased array. But the phased array only served the chairs that had been put in the room. And a woman came in late, and she sat down against the wall across from where I was sitting. She said, "What's going on? I was told there's a loop in here and I can't hear it." And I said, "Well, you're sitting outside the loop. Come over here and take one of these chairs and you're going to hear it." And she did. In order for it to be effective, that phased array loop or any other hearing loop should be set at some international standards that specify the field strength and a number of other conditions that must be met in order for that loop to send out the same signal as people would receive elsewhere. There are also international standards that apply to the settings of the telecoils in hearing aids. And this is something that a lot of hearing care professionals are really not familiar with. So they may not set the hearing aids properly to work with the hearing loop. If people are having a problem with the hearing aids not giving them a good signal, it could be because they're not set right, or simply because the telecoils in their hearing aids are not properly positioned. Anybody that wants to get a facility looped should use a trained installer. And the questions they should ask are, where was that person trained? What loop systems have they designed and installed? And will they provide a certificate of conformity for the IEC standards? The best practices sheet at the HLAA's Get in the Hearing Loop website will review all of these and give people a list of questions that they should ask an installer. Now, what else is a hearing loop besides a perimeter loop or a room loop? Well, this is an example of counter loops that were put in at the Eugene, Oregon airport. The picture on the right shows the loop itself. The big picture shows two counters, each of them with a loop, so that if a person is standing there, they're going to be able to communicate with the person behind the counter. This is another type of counter loop or portable loop that can be put on a desk in a reception area. It can be put actually on a table, on a card table for people playing cards. It may have a remote microphone, or it may have a built-in microphone to pick up the voices. This is a window loop that has been developed basically because of COVID, so that people can communicate. And here you can see there's a microphone built into it, and There's the loop sign telling you that that window is looped. This is another new development. It's a loop mat. There was one hearing care office here in Albuquerque. Actually, they have offices in New Mexico, Arizona, Colorado, and Oklahoma. They bought mats like this to put under the chair of a client who is being demonstrated on the use of hearing loops and telecoils. Of course, the TV room, as I mentioned, can be looped. It can be a wire under the carpeting in the room. It can be like my living room where it's tucked in under the mop boards. It can be down in the crawl space. It can be up in the attic. And it gives you a signal anywhere in the room. This is a chair loop that does the same thing. You can put it under the cushion in an easy chair to watch TV. You can also put it under the head of the bed and under the mattress to listen to TV in bed. This is a looped card table. And there are microphones on 2 of the corners, so they would pick up the voices of people as they're bidding no Trump or whatever it happens to be, and have their bid heard by their partner and their opponents. This is a looped clipboard that can be used as a personal amplifier. Say you have to conduct a meeting and you're going to communicate with people who are standing around in the room. This is going to provide you a stronger signal than you would get just by wearing your hearing aids. And of course, the Tesla car is an example of what can be done. I know a number of people who have put hearing loops in their car so that they can hear people in the back seat or wherever. I happen to be a big proponent of neck loops. And there are 2 types of neck loops available, those that have amplification and a microphone, and unamplified loops. I always recommend to people that they get the amplified loop because that will allow them, for example, to talk hands-free on their cell phone, just like they would, or on their desktop phone, just like they would with a Bluetooth phone. Here are a lot of other uses for a neck loop, to plug into a stereo sound or a sound system, to hear what is in your computer or tablets, on your phone, an MP3 player, on a TV. I use the neck loop when I go to the gym. I plug it into the TV that's on the treadmill and I catch up on the news while I'm also giving myself a little cardio exercise. You can do the same thing on your TV at home. I take an extension cord with me when I'm traveling, and if it's possible, I will plug that into the TV in the hotel room, so I'm not disturbing people on the other side of the wall. I also have an electric piano, and I plug my neck loop into the piano so that I can sit there and practice and not have anybody else in the house hear my bad notes or the other errors that I seem to make pretty regularly. Now, the story of hearing loops in America, so far as I know, really kind of begins with Rocky Stone, who was the founder of the Hearing Loss Association of America. For people who don't know about Rocky, he was a CIA agent who was forced to retire early because his hearing loss had become severe enough that it was affecting his ability to work. And the first thing that he discovered when he did retire and started looking for some kind of a support group was that there was nothing out there for people with hearing loss. So he started the Hearing Loss Association, and he introduced hearing loops to the leaders of a lot of the Hearing Loss Association chapters in the early 80s. Here in Albuquerque, where I'm located, the local SHHH chapter bought a hearing loop in the early 90s. And it was used for over a decade. Every month we would set it up, and after the meeting, we would take it back down and put it away. I recently donated that hearing loop to another nonprofit organization here in town that had some people with hearing loss. After all of these years, it still functions beautifully. At that time, Christ United Methodist Church was the only other loop in use that I'm aware of in Albuquerque for a number of years. Another one of the early pioneers in the looping movement is Professor David Myers from Hope College in Holland, Michigan. Dave is the author of 17 books and has hearing loss himself. He first experienced the use of a loop at Iona Abbey in Scotland. He and his wife regularly make trips to the United Kingdom and to Scotland. And they got in this abbey and he couldn't hear and understand anything that was being said in the service. His wife had noticed a sign coming in that explained that they had a hearing loop and what it was for. And she nudged him and said, you know, turn on your hearing aids to see if that works. Well, to his amazement, he could hear very clearly everything being said in the service. So the first thing Dave did when he got back to Hope was start promoting hearing loops there, first on campus at Hope College, then with the places of worship in Holland, Michigan, and then throughout the state. When he started, the only loops were right there in Holland. Now there's over 900 facilities that he's aware of that have hearing loops in the state of Michigan. Another early pioneer was Dr. Bill Dials out in Santa Rosa near you. Bill started bundling small room-sized hearing loops with every pair of hearing aids he sold. And at this point, he's sold over he's installed over 3,000 hearing aids, hearing loops in homes in the Santa Rosa area, and also in a number of churches and movie theaters. He actually came here to Albuquerque at his own expense many years ago to present at a meeting our SHHH chapter organized to introduce Loop New Mexico to the audiologists and dispensers here in Albuquerque. That was in 2006. He had done a study or a survey of clients, and this graph demonstrates how much happier they were with their audiologist and with their hearing aids when they had one of his loops installed on their TV set. The highest ratings that people gave to their hearing loop capability was 65% of them were very happy compared to about 8% who did not have a telecoil and a hearing loop when they were watching television. Now here in New Mexico, Loop New Mexico was an initiative of the Albuquerque chapter. It was created way back in 2005 by Jim Ogle, who was an engineer at Los Alamos Labs. He commuted every day from Albuquerque to Los Alamos. And he came to a few of our chapter meetings, and that was his first experience with a hearing loop. Well, he thought this was the greatest thing since sliced bread and that everybody in the world needed to be told about it. So he suggested that the chapter take on a project of promoting this technology here in Albuquerque and then throughout the state. Actually, Loop New Mexico was the winner of the very first Get in the Hearing Loop Award from HLAA as a result of this. Other places were doing the same thing though. Aloha, the Adult Loss of Hearing Association in Tucson, way back about that same time, has started a Loop Tucson movement that then grew into a Loop Arizona movement. Then in 2008, audiologist Juliet Sturkins attended a meeting organized by the state chapter of SHHH in Wisconsin. And that was the first time she met and heard Dave Myers speak about his experience and tell about what was happening in Western Michigan. Well, Juliet immediately went back to Oshkosh and began promoting hearing loops and telecoils through her audiology practice. And her husband, who had recently retired, she put him to work as an installer. He was an engineer and understood the technology. He became the installer of loops in Oshkosh while they went out and tried to find other installers throughout the state. And I met Juliet at the 2011 convention, HLAA convention, and I was feeling quite proud about the fact that we had over 100 facilities that had hearing loops installed in Albuquerque at that time, and we were being recognized for it with an award. And when Juliet and I got started talking, I found out they had over 200 in Wisconsin, and that was only the beginning. 2010 was actually a watershed year for hearing loops in this country. First, because of revisions that were made to the ADA, and secondly, because of the Get in the Hearing Loop movement. That was the year that the revisions to the ADA began requiring that assistive listening systems be provided in what they term places of assembly, and that those systems should be hearing aid compatible. And the only type of system that really meets that requirement is hearing loops and telecoils. If it's an FM system or an IR system or something else, in order for it to work and be ADA compliant, they must offer both hearing earphones and neck loops. 2010 was also the year that the Get in the Hearing Loop movement was organized. That was through the joint efforts of the Hearing Loss Association of America and the American Academy of Audiology. The president of the two organizations got together and began promoting the technology. It was intended to be a one-year campaign that would conclude with the next year's HLAA convention, but it became so popular with the members of HLAA that it has continued and is still in operation today. The 2011, when that one was supposed to end, was when HLAA at their convention hosted the International Looping Conference in Washington, DC, and had people from all over the world here to learn more about hearing loop technology. Since then, looping campaigns have started up all over this country. There are 36 HLAA chapters who have their own individual independent hearing loop campaigns. And there's also a lot of independent campaigns. In Loop in Minnesota, it was actually organized by members of the local chapter of HLAA, but they set it up as a separate organization. But there's Let's Loop in Santa Barbara. Sertoma clubs have a national campaign going, and they've raised lots of funds and donated them for various looping projects in their communities. Juliet's Loop Wisconsin was something that was started independent and still is of HLAA. Those are just examples of the 100 or so organizations or initiatives like this that I'm aware of around the country. There are also individuals who have learned about the technology and have promoted it in their community. Dr. Richard Meininger in Lawrence, Kansas is an example. He's a retired professor from the University of Kansas, and he started promoting the technology there, and a number of churches and theaters have been looped as a result of this. Professor Carol Lamaki in Kearney, Nebraska has done exactly the same thing. She learned about the technology. She got them to loop the auditorium at the University of New Mexico Kearney campus. Then she started promoting it with a number of other facilities. They now have several theaters and a number of churches that are looped in Kearney. Hearing care providers have gotten in the loop. There are a lot of websites now that when you go to them, they have a section on their website devoted to and explaining hearing loop and telecoil technology. These are just samples of a few of them that I've tracked down online. 9 states now mandate telecoil counseling because they have found that too many people buying hearing aids are never told about this technology. The first time they learn about it, it's just like I did. They go to an HLAA meeting and they're told that there's a hearing loop and turn on their telecoils. So that now is required counseling before hearing aids can be dispensed in 9 different states. In New York City, they've adopted a city law that mandates that assembly areas in all new or significantly upgraded city facilities must have a hearing loop. Minnesota has done the same thing for state buildings. Maryland and Indiana, legislation like this was pending, and I believe it passed in Indiana, but I haven't double checked to see if it passed. Where will you find hearing loops? Places of worship are the most common and by far the most hearing loops, but that's only the beginning. Theaters have hearing loops. Either the theater itself is looped or they offer neck loops. When the movie industry or theaters moved to the new digital technology and put in new sound systems, they were then required under the ADA to also make new neck loops available. So if you go to a theater, they do have either an FM or an infrared, or in some cases, a hearing loop system. With the infrared and FM systems, or with a loop, they will have receivers that can be borrowed at the box office or elsewhere in the theater, and either a neck loop or earphones to go with it. These are just some examples of live theaters around the country that have installed loops. The Oshkosh Grand Old Opera House is looped. The Albuquerque Little Theater was the first of 6 theaters here in Albuquerque that have put in loops. The Purple Cow in Sarasota, Florida is looped. I call it the Purple Cow. That's the nickname it was given because the building, as you can see, is purple. The carpets are purple, the seats are purple, the curtains are purple. And I used to go down there as a booking agent for performers that went into the Purple Cow. Here are a couple examples of other uses of a loop. One of those countertop loops sitting at a reception desk. The other one is a TV set in a waiting area in a hearing care office, and the waiting area is looped. Here are other examples: a grocery store, a drive-through bank, a prescription counter. Wyman's Food Markets has begun installing hearing loops at the pharmacy counters in all of their stores in the Northeast. And Kenny Drug has been doing the same thing. Gerald Ford Airport was the first airport in this country to install loops in their concourse and at the departure gates. Now there are also counter loops at some of the ticket counters in Union Station in Washington. The concourse at the Milwaukee Intermodal station is looped. Intermodal stations like that serve local and long distance buses and trains, taxi cabs, you name it. They all use that facility. Here's another picture of the concourse at Gerald Ford, a picture of one of the Delta airline gates at the Detroit Metropolitan Airport that is looped. Also the information counters, all of them at the Hartfield Jackson Airport in Atlanta, Georgia, is looped. This is a picture of one of the departure gates at the Rochester, New York Airport that was being prepared for the installation of a phased array loop. A multi-million-dollar renovation of that airport included looping all of the concourses and all of the departure gates. This is a photo of a portable loop at one of the counters at the airport in Seattle. This is a car rental station in, again, in Oregon. There are currently 20 US airports that have now put in hearing loop technology of one sort or another. In the case of Minneapolis, St. Paul, it's been an ongoing project where they do one phase and then do another. They have now looped some of their departure gates in addition to the baggage claim and the foreign departure area. Some of them, like Seattle, are using those counter loops. Others have used loops in various parts of the airport. Virgin Atlantic Airlines is now offering people a choice between neck loops and earbuds on their international flights. But you don't need to fly that airline in order to plug in a neck loop. That's one of the reasons that I'm such a big fan of neck loops. You can do it on almost any airline. A few older airliners still take a two-pronged earphones or neck loop, but you can buy an adapter for that. When I flew to France and Spain, I tried the earbuds that were being passed out by the airline, and the sound quality was dreadful. So I dug into my carry-on baggage and got my neck loop out and plugged it in, and the sound was wonderful. These are some other examples of where you'll find loops. They're in the process, I think, as I saw from on the internet, almost finishing the looping of stations in the BART system in San Francisco. They're also, they have looped train cars in the BART system. Unexpected places that you need to watch for that blue ear symbol, because you're apt to find hearing loops available. A tour boat, a city council chamber, Culver's drive-in fast food place actually had a hearing loop at their drive-through. Sorry about that. This is the Breslin Center at Michigan State University. It's a 12,000 seat arena, and all 12,000 of those seats are served by hearing loops. This is a series of memorial chapels in New York City, and they're looped. New York City is actually the poster child for looping in this country at this point. As I mentioned earlier, all new or renovated city-financed assembly areas must be looped. A half dozen Broadway theaters have put in hearing loop systems in their auditoriums. Others have added neck loops to their FM and infrared systems so that you can hear and enjoy the dialogue and plays and musicals on Broadway. New York City taxi cabs now have loops. It's mandatory on any new taxi cab that it be fitted with a hearing loop. There are hearing loops at some of the ticket counters at Grand Central Station. Lincoln Center has two legitimate theaters, the Mitzi Newhouse and the Vivian Beaumont Theater. Both of those are looped. And it's my understanding that when Geffen Hall, which is the former Fisher Hall, the home of the New York Philharmonic, when that reopens, it will have a loop. There are hearing loops installed at the box office at Madison Square Garden. The ticket booths and information booths at Penn Station are looped. And I was wondering how well it worked. So the first time I was in New York after this was done, I went to one of those information booths and asked the man if people were using the system, and he said they were. The tour buses at the Botanical Gardens have loops. There's a picture of a counter loop at the Museum of Metropolitan Museum. The Guggenheim is another of a half dozen museums in New York City all of which offer hearing loop technology in some form. The New York City subway catching up with BART in some ways, but they were ahead of them in others. Over 600 fare and information booths in the New York City subway are looped. They also have emergency help systems or stations down on the platform. And each of them, in addition to having a loudspeaker so that you can carry on a two-way conversation with somebody that can come help you, they also have a hearing loop. They have on order 1,000 new looped subway cars that are expected to be put in service this year. They also are testing loops on the MTA bus system that serves the greater New York City area. Actually, 2 HLAA chapter members were included in a group of people who were asked to test the loops in those buses, and they said they were working very well. Delta Airlines' new terminal at LaGuardia Airport, all of the departure gates are looped. But that's only the beginning in that case, because that airport, like 5 other airports in the greater New York area, are all served or operated by the Port Authority of New York and New Jersey. And they have just recently announced new accessibility requirements that mandate that any new or updated terminal, airport terminal, must have loops at the departure gates and also at their information counters. The Port Authority also manages the Staten Island Ferry, the Long Island Railroad, the PATH trains, and all of those terminals are going to have to put in hearing loops at their information counters. Amtrak has recently ordered 83 train sets, and that is an engine and a number of cars that amounts to about a total of 500 rail cars that will all have hearing loops installed in them. And they have an option for 800 more. That's a $3.5 billion investment in hearing loop trains. Here's some other examples of hearing loops in transportation. The Indian Trails Bus Company that serves Upper Michigan and parts of Wisconsin has installed hearing loops in all of their buses. The other picture is of a looped counter at one of the bus terminals in Seattle. Now, when you go abroad, it's a whole different story. The hearing loops are so common in the United Kingdom. The Heathrow sign export or express sign says, for users of hearing aids, we fitted our board PA system with an induction loop. You get on the trains and they're looped. If you're at the waiting area at Heathrow Airport, the waiting area is looped. At the Newcastle and other airports in the United Kingdom, the ticket counters are looped. In rail travel in England, not only are the trains looped, but the waiting areas are looped. There's a photo of a London suburban train station with a loop sign showing. There's a loop installed on a pole out on the platform. And again, like you find in New York, there's a help point that not only has a loudspeaker, but it has a hearing loop for people to hear when they're trying to get help. London buses are looped. They have a loop at the front door so that when you get on and try to talk to the driver, you can carry on a conversation. For years, actually it started way back in 1998, the taxi cabs in New York, in London, all have hearing loops. The London Underground is looped, and here are photos of various areas in the Underground or the subway where you would find loops. At Westminster Abbey, the cathedral is looped, and anybody who was invited and went to the Queen's coronation, or so the anniversary of her coronation way back in 2003, would have read a note saying that the whole of the church is served by a hearing loop. These are other examples of loop technology in England: a bank teller, a ticket window, Canterbury Cathedral. Here's another ticket window. The cash register or checkout area at Marks and Spencer's department theater or department store is looped. There's Iona Abbey where Dave first learned about loops. The Lord Nelson is an excursion ship that was built partly to train people with disabilities in the art of sailing and sailing ships. And it is looped so that not only would people with other disabilities be able to hear, hard of hearing passengers and trainees would also be able to hear. The Louvre in Paris features hearing loop technology. The cathedral prior to its recent fire was looped. They have a tour of the catacombs that are under that cathedral. And when I took that tour, they loaned me, it was an infrared system receiver, and they didn't have neck loops, but I had my neck loop with me, so I plugged it in and was able to use it on that tour. I was there on a family vacation with family members, one of whom speaks French. And I was surprised when we went into the tourist office in a little village of 500 people where we had rented an old farmhouse. Sitting on the counter there at Les Aziz was that sign that you see with a hearing loop on it. It was a countertop loop. Fortunately or unfortunately, it wouldn't do me any good because I don't speak French and my sister didn't need it. For anybody else who was hard of hearing and spoke French, they were going to be able to carry on a two-way conversation. The Der Kölner Cathedral in Cologne is looped. Mike Langner, a looping engineer here in Albuquerque, took a boat trip up the Danube, and they had neck loops available for the people on the boat so that they could hear the tour guide as they were going up the river. Domodedovo is only one of the 3 major airports in Moscow, all of which are looped. Stockholm's Arlanda Airport and all of the other major airports in Sweden are looped. And those are signs from other airports that offer hearing loop technology. It is very common throughout the United Kingdom and Western Europe. This photo is almost enough to make me want to go to South Korea because it's noted by many people as being the most beautiful airport in the world. And there you can see they also have put in loops at their airport. If there's anybody close to the United Kingdom in the availability of hearing loops, it's Australia. Again, all of their major airports have hearing loops. They have installed hearing loops on their commuter trains. The Sydney Opera House, the famous clamshell opera house, is looped, as is the observatory and many other facilities in Sydney. This is a bus totem where you can go see the bus schedule, and also if there are any announcements being made on that totem, you can hear them because it has a hearing loop in addition to a loudspeaker. This is another example of the use of hearing loops in Australia at the tax office, at the Melbourne Cricket Grounds, the Brisbane City Council, the university in Bendigo. The Cochlear America's actual headquarters are in Sydney, and it's looped. And I find that interesting because I don't find Cochlear necessarily that sympathetic to hearing loop technology in this country. But these are just examples. They're not the only loops that are available in those facilities or in those cities. Now, where can you find hearing loops if you're traveling here in this country? 2 places that I suggest to people are the timetoloopamerica.com website and the aldlocator.com website. In Europe, there is a website that was just recently taken over by the International Hearing Loop Manufacturers Association called Let's Hear, that you can go online to find local looped venues. And I'm going to leave that on the screen for just a couple of more seconds for anybody who may be writing down those addresses. If you don't get them now, if you want to send me an email later, I will send the addresses to you. Back that up just a moment. I thought I had changed this slide, but I don't see it there. It's my understanding that there's a very strong possibility that before very long, you will be able to go to Google Maps and locate hearing loops in this country. Now, for anybody who wants more information on hearing loops and on the advocacy materials that you might want to use to go out and promote hearing loops in your community, the best resource is the Hearing Loss Association's website. And it's got a very long, complicated name, but if you just go to hearingloss.org and check there or click on their programs link, you will find a link for the Get in the Hearing Loop campaign. And there you can, there's a whole world of material and information on hearing loops and hearing loop technology. These are some other resources for information that I suggest people go to. Hearingloop.org is the website that Dave Myers established years ago when he started promoting hearing loops there in Western Michigan. SOFFNABQ is my website for where I have posted all of the magazine articles that I have had printed over the last several years concerning this technology. LoopNM is the Loop New Mexico website where you'll find the list of the 150 looped venues that we're aware of here in New Mexico. The Ampetronic site, in my opinion, is one of the most valuable and interesting sites to get technical information about hearing loops. They are one of the major manufacturers of hearing loops and the company that has looped many, many airports and other facilities around the world. Contacta Inc. Is another of the major British looping firms. Now, in case you thought I was never going to stop, I've gotten to the end of my slides, and I would entertain any questions that anyone might have.
Do you make your slides available some way so that we can go back and look at particular slides somehow?
Sure. Which ones do you want?
Well, there was some at the very beginning I was interested in where you were showing how the hearing versus the non-hearing perceptions. And I'd like to be able to show that one to my husband.
I was going to say I could send you the whole slide presentation if you want.
That would be one way to get it. And I would be able to review it with a friend as well.
Okay, who am I talking to?
Cynthia Newton.
I'm sorry?
Cynthia Newton.
Okay, can you give me your email address?
Earthfire, EARTHFIRE, pottery @gmail.com.
Okay. All right, I'll send you the whole slide presentation.
Thank you.
Question.
Yeah, go ahead, Jim.
Okay. Oh, Alan. Oh, it's Alan. I have a question. Do any of the hearing aid products at Costco, being one of the biggest hearing aid dispensers in the country nowadays, do any of them have the loop technology possibility?
Most of them do. I think they have at least one loop, one T-coil equipped model from each of the manufacturers that they deal with. And they also, a couple of years ago, they had taken it out, but now they have put the Telecoil back in their Kirkland brand hearing aids, which is the private label hearing aids that are made for them.
Right. Okay.
Actually, I wear Rexton hearing aids that came from Costco, and the Rextons do still offer a Telecoil option.
Mhm.
Steve, we have several people who have put their hands up. If you look at the top of your screen, you can see first one is Elliot Turbo.
Okay, yeah, thanks. Yeah, first, Stephen, that was an excellent presentation. Learned a lot. Appreciate your time. Couple of questions. First of all, you had a lot of examples of loop technology, perhaps more in Europe and Australia than in the United States. Now, would that be because the national health services of those countries provide hearing aids to, free of cost to people with hearing loss, and therefore there's a greater prevalence of hearing aids in those countries?
I think that's part of the reason for it. Part of it probably also goes back to the fact that the technology was developed in England and was promoted way back in the 30s back there. Here in the States, it didn't really get much mention or promotion until the revisions to the ADA were made. And then it started becoming more common.
Mhm. Yeah, I have a second question, if I may. You mentioned early in your presentation about some of the small hearing loops. I think it was like a cushion that would go under your chair, and maybe a small one that you use for a room. Do you have any more information on those, specifically who makes them and where we can get them?
Well, I would suggest somebody like, I'm trying to think what they changed their name. It was Harris Communications, and if you put that in, you'll still come up with their new name. They sell these devices and these equipment, or you could go to Oval Window, who's one of the American manufacturers of hearing loops. They do offer a kit that includes a chair loop, or you can get their kit with a small size room loop driver in it. Actually, that's what I used, and I had a second unit like that, so I made my own chair loop that I put under the bed.
So these are easy enough to hook up without professional assistance.
Yes,
Mhm.
depending to a degree on your TV set, if it's for watching TV, because with older TVs, you could just plug a jack into the TV to get it to work. With the newer ones, it takes a couple of other parts, but the people at Oval Window could direct you as to what other parts you need and counsel you on how to hook it up. It's not that complicated a process. There's also on my website, Loop New Mexico website, there is a short slide presentation there on installing a home loop.
Very good. Thank you.
Steve, can you quit sharing your screen so that we can see everybody in the gallery when the people speak, so their face is big?
Well, let's see,
Okay,
if I press escape, is it going to escape me from
At the top of
everything?
your screen, you should see in green
Okay, there, just a minute.
a way to stop sharing, or it's at the bottom.
Well, multiple participants can share.
It's
Okay,
on the Zoom screen.
I'm still not getting everybody. How do I turn the share off?
Like that.
I'm gonna do it. Let's see. Okay. Did that help? No. Stop participation.
There,
There, you got it.
Okay, I had my hand up, so I think I am
Yes.
next going.
Yes.
This has been an excellent presentation. It's answered a lot of questions that I've had because I'm still relatively new to hearing aids, but it's brought up a few more. But one question I had was, I recently was on jury duty in San Francisco at the Superior Courthouse and discovered to my dismay, sitting in the audience part of the jury room was a very small jury room. I could, after I complained, I could hear the judge and the two attorneys. I could not hear a word said to people who were in the jury box or the voir dire box as they were being interviewed. But I know others in the room could hear them because I heard laughter at responses, et cetera. Is that something that Loop would help? And is that something that we should work on in San Francisco to get all the jury rooms looped, which seems like it should have been done a while back? And is this something that the new infrastructure bill could help fund? Sort of all one big question.
There probably would be some pushback on looping the some courtrooms because of the fact that even if you put in a phased array, if it's in a multi-story building, they may be able to hear below and above that courtroom. And if they want to keep anything going on in court confidential, then they wouldn't want to use the loop. But they can put in an infrared system in a courtroom and receivers and neck loops so that people can hear. Also, I have a wide X Evoke, very expensive, and I'm about to turn it in and get an Oticon. These are sort of top of the line hearing aids. And if there's a loop in a room, do I just turn on my phone with the hearing aid on it and it's automatically connected? Or is there something else I need to do? If it's a room loop and it's turned on, all you would need to do is either touch a button on the hearing aid to set it on the telecoil setting, or use the remote. With most hearing aids today, the new ones, you'll have 5 or even 6 different programs. For example, on my hearing aids, the first program is directional microphones and they pick up sound all around me. The second setting is directional and it picks up only what's in front of me. The third setting is a combination microphone and telecoil setting, so that I can hear what's going out over the loop, but I also can communicate with people next to me. Then
So
the
my
next setting
audiologist-
would be just telecoil, and all I hear is what's being broadcast by the loop. And you just touch the button, and there'll be 1 beep or 2 or 3 or 4.
This is my second pair of hearing aids, and I've asked the audiologist about it, and he just bypasses me and has never shown me that. So I think I need to be more forceful.
Yes.
Either that or find a different audiologist.
That's
Yeah.
a possibility.
I'm the person that got the bill written and passed in New Mexico that requires that they tell people about this before they fit them with hearing aids. I know there was an effort made in California to do the same thing, but I don't think it ever got out of committee. And I don't know that anybody has ever followed up with a second effort to do it. But that's really the only way that it's going to work, in my opinion. Partly, I think, because these hearing care providers are not adequately trained in the technology themselves. And rather than show their ignorance, they just don't talk about it.
Yep.
And the second one is that they assume that you won't need it and won't use it. And that is false assumption in my thought. They should tell you about it and let you decide whether or not it's something you want. It adds absolutely nothing to the cost of hearing aids. In my opinion, all hearing aids that are big enough to hold a telecoil should have one. It doesn't mean it has to be activated if the person doesn't want it, but it's there if they ever need it. I don't know how many times I've seen people come to their first HLAA meeting after they got telecoils in their hearing aids and tear up when they say, why wasn't I told about this? I can hear so much better this way.
And the new hearing aids do have a device you can buy separate that connects to your TV. Is that
Yes.
similar? Is that the?
Well, there's two different ways you can do that. You can get a device that connects to the TV that sends a Bluetooth signal to your hearing aids, or you can buy a remote microphone that you would set in front of the TV, and it would do the same thing.
Thank you very much. Sorry to monopolize the questions. That was very
Just-
informative.
Just a quick comment about the Superior Court and their jury system is that it's all controlled here in the state of California. So if we want looping or infrared systems or whatever we want in courtrooms, we have to go to our legislator.
So is that something we can lobby our state senator and state assembly people?
I would
regarding?
think so. For me, I got called for jury duty a couple times, and their equipment was worse than mine. And so I ended up not being on the panel. But it's, can you imagine the number of people who don't hear well, who don't have hearing aids, who get on one of those panels? And would you want to be judged by them? To me, it's crazy. I mean,
For reference purposes, if you are going to advocate for this, the U.S. Supreme Court is looped.
yeah,
So there is a precedent there. There, I guess they don't have to worry about a courtroom above them or next side or anything else. My niece happens to be one of the justices on the New Mexico or on the Nebraska Supreme Court, and she is in the process right now of trying to get the Supreme Court of Nebraska looped. And their situation apparently is very similar to yours in California. They have oversight over all the district courts in the state too. So I'm hoping that this will lead to something more than it has.
Ann Thomas has a question. She has her hand up.
Actually, I have a comment. All courts in the United States are required to have assistive listening systems. They were not excluded like other buildings. Other buildings were excluded if you didn't have a PA. So if the space doesn't have a PA, they're not required to have an assistive listening system. That doesn't mean they're not required to provide you with technology to help you hear better, but not a system. But courts were not excluded. So the easiest things for them to install are FMs or infrareds. Now, I don't know whether you thought to ask, oh, what kind of assistive listening system do you have at the court? So they have to have them. There's no exclusion. Now, a court may be lax about having training for people who know what they have and know how to use them. And then that's a follow-up with that particular court.
Okay, Jim Rao has a comment, also a question.
Yes, I'd like to know if anyone on here knows anything about whether VA is or is not required to meet ADA standards. I am told that as a part of the executive branch of our government, they are not required. But they do have their own internal other regulations that they must meet. I've been trying to lobby for hearing loops in VA facilities for some time now, and it's been quite a frustrating effort. And does anyone know about their responsibility to provide hearing assistance for their patients?
I know that I worked in the VA for over 40 years. And I remember when we had a patient came to me and he was depressed and I was seeing him for his depression, but he couldn't hear me. So I sent a consult to audiology pointing out that he couldn't take advantage of the treatment he needed. And that was grounds for getting him a hearing aid free. And he was non-service connected. So there is some effort to do something about individuals, but I must agree with you. I remember we got a brand new hospital while I was there, and they had the state-of-the-art auditorium. They didn't have a loop in it.
Did it have an FM system or an infrared system?
Nope.
Bob, what year was that?
That was probably 2005. No, 2000.
So Jim Rao, I have advocated at the VA as well.
Yeah.
And it's my understanding that the VA is required to provide communication access for people with hearing loss. They would come under 504. Some of the 504 things, some of the other things they don't. I was very rudely treated at the VA when I talked to the head person, the Department of Audiology. And, you know, when someone is really nasty to you, and I went to my senator, and my senator contacted them because they weren't providing accommodations. And when someone is really, really rude to you and nasty, or to me, I have a tendency to crawl back into my, even for those of you who know me, you may be surprised by this, but I retreat and put it aside. And then after my self-esteem gets revived, then I come back and approach it again sometime. Jim, can you contact me later? I would like to address this as a state issue. I think it's unconscionable that they're offering workshops, they're offering everything at the VA, and there's absolutely not one single thing for a person with hearing loss. So I would be interested in working on that with you. So I'll put my email in the chat.
Thank you. Christopher Baker?
Hello, my name's Chris Baker. I'm actually way over here in Ohio and got word of this session, and I'm glad I joined it. I'm sorry I was a little bit late, Stephen, so I may have missed some of the stuff at the beginning, but it's kind of strange. I go to a very good audiologist department at a university here in Northeastern Ohio, and they don't push the hearing loop stuff here at all. In fact, they seem to treat it as a dying technology now taken over by Bluetooth and other such things. But I notice also that the HLAA chapter that I go to has not been pushing. They've been trying to talk about loops, but for hospitals, they talk about other assisted hearing devices or devices that would transcribe the doctors talking into text onto a portable device that it can be handheld, so handed to the patient. The patient can read what the doctor is speaking to him over his bed, or put in headphones. So I've been intrigued by hearing loops and telecoils. And when I first got my first hearing aids with telecoils, I was really happy how it worked with the phone, just putting the phone up against the hearing aid and it switched over to, but now even with these lightweight phones, you can't get that to work even. I had to add a magnet to the outside of my Apple phone to trigger the telecoil because the phone doesn't have enough metal in it or magnetism in it to do that. But anyway, the point I wanted to get at is, so I wear a Phonak device that goes around my neck, and my audiologist didn't know that this was actually a miniature loop. But I love it. I mean, my hearing aid can die, but if this dies, I'm really in trouble. I just love this thing. So and it does have a port, as Stephen talked about, where you can plug in other things that have capability of sending out signals that aren't Bluetooth enabled. So that works too. But I just did want to ask one question now. The problem I'm having is that I want to have people, I have the technology, but they have to have the microphone. In other words, and I looked into getting a Roger pen, which is an FM microphone, but it's very expensive. But the problem is I'm in my own little loop here, but I don't have any way of getting the people who are talking, even in a church that has a loop. If they don't use the microphone system, then it's useless, to me at least, or they walk away from the mic or whatever. You mentioned that taxis in London have loop. Where's the microphone? I understand the car being looped and you have a hearing aid and it has telecoil, but the driver's wearing a microphone, or how does that work?
No, I think the microphone is on the division between the front and the back seats, so that anybody sitting in the back seat can speak to it. Same thing with the ones in New York City. There's actually a sign showing you the microphone, and it's behind the driver on the back of his seat.
Yeah, but you want to hear him talking to you, don't you? So he needs the microphone and you want to hear him. Isn't that the purpose of the loop inside the taxi or inside the subway or whatever the case may be?
I'm not sure where the microphone itself is located. It could be overhead.
Okay.
If it's a sensitive enough mic, it would work that way.
All right. So that's the issue I'm having out here. There's only like 2 places in all of Northeastern Ohio that I know they have a loop. And
no, one thing you might explore to use with that neck loop is a personal FM system.
Yeah.
It's old technology, but frankly, you can pick up a used personal FM system for $100 or less on eBay. I have bought a half a dozen of them because I've gone to meetings where I needed to make a presentation and there were people who were hard of hearing and there was nothing else in the room. I would loan each one of them a receiver and a neck loop. And then I would use the transmitter. Or if like recently, I went to a meeting where they were explaining the new changes made in a health plan. And I gave my transmitter to the presenter, and I was sitting halfway back in the room, but I was able, using my receiver, to hear just as well as if I was in the front row.
Exactly.
And you can pick them up on eBay for not much.
Right. Okay. Thank you.
Okay, next up, Steve, do you still have a little bit of time? We have 2 people with their hands raised.
I've got time.
Okay, Larry, you're next.
Yeah, I heard a speaker at the HLAA National Virtual Convention, I guess last June, who was a representative of the Bluetooth Industry Association. And, you know, he was a marketing guy, so he was obviously in a sales mode, but he said there in their next major release of Bluetooth, they will be coming out with a broadcast version of it that can serve audiences, can be used in airports. He gave several examples like that. I think that he didn't emphasize this, but I think that would require a new version of Bluetooth in the hearing aids, so it would only be in the next generation of hearing aids. But he mentioned that he thought they would start rolling this out or it'd be released this year. Did you hear that presentation, and do you have a comment on that?
I didn't go to the convention, so I didn't hear that presentation, but I went to the convention in 2011 when one of the speakers from one of the major hearing aid manufacturers said that within 10 years, we're going to have this technology where Bluetooth will do this. Well, those 10 years are gone and we don't have it yet. It gets into the area too of whether or not they're going to make that system available to all manufacturers, so that if you're wearing Rexton hearing aids, and the Bluetooth transmitter is going to transmit to them. Will it also work with Oticon hearing aids and Phonak hearing aids? Because the systems they're using now are proprietary. If you have Rexton hearing aids, you can't connect to the Bluetooth transmitter for somebody else's Phonak hearing aids.
It would still work through a Bluetooth a neck loop, wouldn't it?
I sit on the Bluetooth LE committee as the HLA, as one of the HLAA representatives. So I may have the most information to answer your question for you. So the new Bluetooth that you're talking about is called Bluetooth LE. They are still in the process of refining all of the details about what it is going to be. The codex has been developed. It will be launched in some way, I'm thinking for sure by the end of 2020, but that doesn't mean that hearing aids are going to have it by the end of 2020. So premier headphones and things like that, audiophile pieces will have Bluetooth LE. I got 2 cochlear implants in the last year, and actually the last version of Bluetooth is also considered LE, although it doesn't have the audio sharing piece. And that portion is used to connect to the app in my phone. So there are a few little pieces that are around, and the hearing aid manufacturers are actually the group that contacted, and they all Bluetooth LE is this huge conglomerate. They contacted, and they're members of Bluetooth LE because they wanted to have one Bluetooth for all devices, rather than having like what Steve was talking about, like each individual manufacturer has their own proprietary version of Bluetooth built into the devices. It's anticipated by some people that it could take up to 10 years for the majority of people with hearing aids, because, you know, you get a hearing aid every 5 years. So if you just got a hearing aid and it didn't have it, and they're not out now, and so maybe 2023, there might be the first hearing aids, 2024. So it's going to be a while before it's mainstream. Now, they have committed that it is not Bluetooth and not other assistive listening technologies. It's going to be Bluetooth LE plus hearing loops, plus FMs, plus other things. So they're not excluding the other types of assistive listening technologies. What the vision is, if it can come to fruition with audio sharing, will change everybody's life in the world. So it's for everybody. It's not just for us. So you would walk into an airport. People with normal hearing can't understand in an airport. So this will be a huge, major infrastructure change for the future. Does that help, Larry?
Yes, thank you.
And you said that it would be rolled out around 2020. That's a couple of years ago.
No, I didn't. That was a mistake. Sorry. So,
when do they roll out?
So it has not been formally released. There are no devices at this time that have Bluetooth LE that would be able to do audio sharing.
But was there a date that they think it will roll out?
Well, so originally they were hoping to have some things out this fall, but they're still talking. So it keeps getting later and later. I can't imagine that there would be anything until late 2022 if they were the first things. And they meet once a week, and I have never participated in any group that was more caring, more respectful, more diverse, with a variety of different opinions in my life. So, and they really are committed to making this work for us as well.
Good.
Yeah.
Thank you, Ann. Arlene, you're the last person with the hand up.
Yes, thank you. I just to add, I have my own comment, but just to add what you were talking about, I was at a conference that was the European Federation of Hard of Hearing People, and they also did, they had the Bluetooth industry people there and also looping people there, and in an amicable discussion. And the upshot was that they didn't think this was actually going to be universal or to be of use for at least 10 to 15 years. In other words, to have what you were talking about, Anne, getting the hearing aids that have the compatible technology, and it was also everything, would be T-coils and also Bluetooth. But on a practical basis, 10 to 15 years before you could just go to place and expect that you would have the equipment to use the technology that's there. I wanted to follow up with the person who was, I believe, in Ohio, who was at a brand new hospital that the auditorium did not have any assistive listening system. And with that as an example, I'm no newcomer to the ADA and assistive listening. I used hearing aids for 25 years and now cochlear implants for another 24 years with 2 books on my experiences. And I know for a fact that the most ignored part of the ADA is the part that is for assistive listening systems, that all those auditoriums do not have the equipment that is required. We all know that it is totally ignored. And with that as background, that's why New Jersey, I would thank you, Steve, that you listed New Jersey on the list of states that are doing something about looping. We are in the process of trying to get a piece of legislation passed that would require looping for new or substantial renovation. And the requirements would be in the construction code. In other words, it's not like the ADA where it's complaint driven. There is the legislation requires it to be put in the construction code so that somebody taking out a construction permit, like the auditorium in that hospital, would have to meet the code, the inspector, and if they do not meet the code, they have to explain why an induction loop was not possible. So that takes the responsibility for policing places to put in the ADA from consumer complaints to the construction inspectors. And that's what this is about. And we're gaining traction. We actually have a meeting with the New Jersey governor's office on plans for our disability actions for this year. And they know about this, this bill, and it's gaining traction. Of course, you're going to have people objecting to it, and we are educating first, because as other people have shown, nobody knows about induction loops until you mount an educational campaign. And that's what we're doing in New Jersey. But I wanted to make that clear. The policing of the requirement is a different method now. You know, the ADA has no teeth. And so we're trying to fix that.
Do you have a draft of that legislation?
Oh, sure.
Arlene?
Definitely.
Could you send it to me?
Absolutely. Sure.
Because I would like to see if that's something we can get on the agenda here in New Mexico.
Yeah. Yeah. Because you know that's a problem. I mean, we have somebody sitting in a hospital auditorium in Ohio and there's nothing there. Well, what is he supposed to do? He has to file a complaint. Hello, good luck with that. And then what? I mean, it's just, we've been banging our heads against the wall for a long, long time.
Thank you
Yes,
very
we're-
much.
Yeah, we're from the hearing loss chapter in Redwood City, California. That's the group that's putting this on. And they're going to tear down the Veterans Memorial Senior Center and rebuild it new. And I think the evidence here we have is we have to be on them about putting those loops in.
I have a commitment from them that they're committed to installing hearing loops in your new building in Redwood City.
Oh, yeah. I mean, we already have one in the old building, but, and I think, with them, I mean, for those seniors that go there, I mean, they
Yeah.
need,
So Regine connected me with them because we were having another conversation about signage. And they're completely committed. It's a done deal. So nobody needs to really spend much energy about that, which is fabulous, right?
yeah.
And Arlene, people have been there. It's been on the agenda in California for a while. It depends on when the building codes committee gets to it, to have something similar to what you're talking about in California.
Wow, what a good meeting, everybody. I think I want to thank Stephen for talking to us today. He did a fabulous job.
Oh, well,
Thank you.
thank you. Thank you. It was my pleasure.